So we're taking a deep dive into How Children Fail by John Holt.
Yeah,
This book, man, it really kind of shook things up back in the day in the education world.
it did.
And we're going to explore some of his, well, most thought-provoking ideas, I think, from these excerpts you've shared.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to find some pretty surprising insights about how traditional schooling really impacts kids.
Yeah, what's fascinating about this book is how it highlights this almost like a paradoxical relationship between learning and school.
Yeah.
Think about it. Babies are these incredible learning machines. They're just soaking up information like effortlessly.
Totally.
But then something seems to shift when they enter the traditional school system.
Yeah, it's like that natural curiosity gets stifled.
Exactly.
And Holt really dives into some compelling reasons why that might be.
Yeah, one of the key ideas he presents is that schools, even with the best intentions, can create environments that actually hinder real learning.
Yeah, he talks about these coping strategies.
Yeah.
Like those little tricks we all develop to get through school, even if it means we're not really learning.
Right.
It's like answer land.
Yes.
You know that feeling when you're in class and you're just trying to figure out what the teacher wants to hear
Exactly.
instead of actually thinking about the question?
Exactly. It becomes about performance, not genuine understanding.
Right.
And that ties into this larger issue of the fear of failure that's so prevalent in many school systems.
Yeah.
Kids become more focused on getting the right answer than on truly grasping the concepts.
Yeah, and that fear can manifest in surprising ways.
It really can.
Holt even talks about how some kids might act out or become aggressive, not because they're bad, but because they're deeply insecure and afraid of being seen as stupid.
Absolutely. It's a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
They'd rather be perceived as disruptive than intellectually inadequate.
Right.
But deep down, it stems from that same fear of not measuring up.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if kids are so afraid to fail, are they really free to learn?
That's a great question, and it leads us to another crucial point that Holt makes. The difference between real learning and simply going through the motions.
Yeah, he argues that real learning isn't about memorization or blind obedience. It's about making connections, seeing the relationships between ideas, and applying knowledge in the real world.
Right.
He has this great example in the book that illustrates this perfectly. He talks about a student trying to memorize which salts are soluble in water,
Right.
but having absolutely no idea how that connects to anything in everyday life.
Imagine a student struggling to memorize a list of salts, but having no idea that those same salts are what make soap work or why some lakes are salty.
Yeah.
It's knowledge without understanding,
Right.
and it's a recipe for frustration.
Yeah, it makes you think about how much we learn in school that we never actually understand.
Yes.
Right? We're just memorizing facts and figures
Yeah.
without grasping the underlying concepts.
Exactly. And this lack of true understanding is ultimately what leads to the failure that Holt describes. Students might pass tests, but they haven't internalized the knowledge.
Right.
They can't apply it, and they've often lost their intrinsic motivation to learn.
It's like they're just going through the motions, ticking boxes, without ever really grasping the why behind it all.
Exactly.
Which begs the question, what's the point of all this learning if it doesn't translate into real understanding and the ability to apply that knowledge?
And that's where things get really interesting, because Holt doesn't just critique the traditional model of education. He also offers some pretty radical solutions.
Yeah, he seems to be advocating for a major shift in how we approach learning, doesn't he?
Absolutely. He argues that we need to move away from this emphasis on rote memorization and standardized testing, and instead create learning environments that foster curiosity, critical thinking, and a genuine love of learning.
Yeah.
Environments that encourage exploration, experimentation, and even failure without fear of judgment or punishment.
It's about creating a safe space for intellectual risk-taking, a place where kids can ask questions, challenge assumptions, and make mistakes without feeling like they're stupid.
Precisely. And it's not just about the classroom environment either.
Right.
Holt emphasizes the crucial role that parents and educators play in nurturing this love of learning. He talks about the importance of modeling curiosity, asking open-ended questions, and encouraging kids to pursue their own interests.
It's about fostering that intrinsic motivation to learn, rather than relying on external rewards or punishments.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder, are we preparing children to be passive consumers of information, or are we empowering them to be active, engaged, and critical thinkers who can shape the world around them?
It's a powerful question, and one that we all need to be asking ourselves, whether we're parents, educators, or simply lifelong learners ourselves, because ultimately the way we approach education shapes the future of our society.
So what does this all mean for you?
Yeah.
What stands out from all this? Maybe it makes you rethink your own learning experiences or how you approach helping the kids in your life learn.
Right.
Maybe it even sparks some questions about alternative educational approaches,
Because there are alternatives out there, institutions that are challenging the traditional model and embracing innovative approaches to learning.
like ALX, for example.
Yeah.
They're doing some really interesting things in the world of tech education, particularly in Morocco.
Mm-hmm.
If you're curious to learn more about these innovative approaches, check out alafrica.com/Morocco.
It's definitely worth exploring.
This deep dive really highlights the need to examine our assumptions about education.
It does.
Is it truly fostering curiosity, critical thinking, and a lifelong love of learning?
That's something worth pondering.
Absolutely. And if this conversation has ignited that spark of curiosity in you, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear this. It really helps us grow and bring these important conversations to a wider audience.
Because the more we question, the more we explore, the more we learn, the better equipped we'll be to create a future where education truly empowers individuals and transforms societies.
Thanks for joining us on this thought-provoking deep dive.
It really boils down to asking ourselves, what kind of learners do we want to cultivate?
Right.
Do we want to raise a generation of passive test takers or active, engaged individuals who are passionate about learning?
Yeah, Holt seems to believe that a big part of the solution lies in shifting our focus from external validation to intrinsic motivation.
Exactly. He talks about how rewarding kids for good grades or punishing them for bad ones
Right.
can actually undermine their natural desire to learn.
Right.
Instead, he encourages us to create environments where learning itself is the reward.
So how do we do that? How do we make learning intrinsically motivating?
Well, Holt suggests that one of the most effective ways is to give kids more autonomy over their learning.
Okay.
Let them explore their own interests, pursue their own questions, and discover the joy of learning for its own sake.
So it's about giving them that freedom
Yeah.
to experiment, to make mistakes, and to learn from those mistakes without the fear of judgment or failure.
Remember, children are naturally curious.
Yeah.
They're born explorers.
Yeah.
Our job as parents and educators is to nurture that curiosity, not stifle it.
So it's not about filling their heads with facts and figures.
Right.
It's about equipping them with the tools and the mindset they need to become lifelong learners.
And that's where Holt's ideas become truly revolutionary.
Yeah.
He's not just talking about tweaking the existing system.
Right.
He's calling for a fundamental rethinking of what education should be.
It's about creating learning environments that are less about conformity and more about creativity.
Exactly.
Less about rote memorization and more about critical thinking.
And less about fear of failure and more about the joy of discovery.
Yeah, it's about empowering kids to become active participants in their own learning rather than passive recipients of information.
He envisions classrooms where students are encouraged to ask questions, to challenge assumptions, and to explore different perspectives, classrooms where the focus is on understanding, not just memorizing.
Holt paints a pretty compelling picture,
He does.
doesn't he? But how realistic is it to actually implement these kinds of changes in the real world?
Well, it's definitely a challenge.
Yeah.
But it's not impossible. There are already educators and institutions out there who are embracing these ideas and creating innovative learning environments that are more in line with Holt's vision.
And that's where places like ALX come in, right?
Absolutely. Organizations like ALX are proving that it's possible to create learning experiences that are both rigorous and engaging, that foster both technical skills and critical thinking, and that prepare students not just for jobs, but for life.
And remember, if you're interested in exploring these kinds of innovative approaches to education, you can find more information at alafrica.com/Morocco.
This deep dive into how children fail has really challenged us to rethink our assumptions about education, hasn't it?
It's definitely made me question a lot of things about my own educational experiences.
And it's left me feeling hopeful that there are people out there who are working to create a better, more humane and more effective approach to education.
But ultimately, it's up to each of us to decide what kind of learners we want to be and what kind of world we want to create for future generations.
And that's a pretty empowering thought, wouldn't you say?
It really is. It reminds us that we all have a role to play in shaping the future of education.
Absolutely.
Whether we're parents, educators, or simply lifelong learners, we can all contribute to creating a world where learning is a source of joy, not fear.
And a world where education empowers individuals to reach their full potential and make a meaningful contribution to society.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into how children fail,
Yeah.
What are some key takeaways that you hope our listeners will walk away with?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that we need to question our assumptions about education.
Yeah,
What is the true purpose of learning?
right.
Is it about memorizing facts and passing tests? Or is it about fostering curiosity, critical thinking, and a lifelong love of learning?
And how can we create learning environments that nurture those qualities? That's the challenge, isn't it?
It is, but it's a challenge worth taking on because the stakes are high. The way we educate our children will shape the future of our world. So let's be mindful of the messages we send them about learning about failure and about their own potential.
Absolutely. And if this deep dive has sparked some new ideas or challenged some old assumptions for you, we encourage you to keep exploring. Maybe you'll want to check out John Holt's book, How Children Fail, in its entirety,
Yeah.
or explore some of the alternative educational approaches that are out there.
Right, and remember we mentioned ALX earlier.
Yeah.
They're doing some really exciting work in the field of tech education, especially in Morocco. You can find out more about their innovative programs at alcafrica.com/Morocco.
And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone who might be interested in these important conversations. Your support helps us grow and reach a wider audience.
Because the more we question, the more we learn, and the better equipped we'll be to create a future where education truly empowers individuals and transforms societies.
Thanks for joining us on this thought-provoking deep dive.